All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sean Cotter. I am the executive director for Wicked Queer, but I'm also the curator of our first horror shorts program. Woo! Slash, 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 slash. Yay! And I'm joined here by the filmmakers of the program. I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna slow down because I'm a little excited. Sorry, because it is our first program, and I love horror films and also genre films. So bravo filmmakers for making genre films, and please continue to work in this fashion, because the world needs more queer representation in genre films. So that being said, let's go around and have everyone introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their films. So Connor, why don't you start us off?
Hey, I'm Connor. I am currently based in Des Moines, Iowa. I am the producer, writer, and director of We Won't Do Anything Crazy. It's been an idea that I've had for a long time now, and this past year I was finally able to produce it. So yeah, and I'm very happy to be in this program.
Nice. Well, glad to have you. Piper, if you want to go next.
Hi, I'm Piper De Palma. I am the writer, director, and producer of Carmilla, and I have Brandon, the DP, David, the co-editor, and Talo, the composer of this lovely film. And basically how it started was I read Carmilla, the 19th century novella, and I fell in love with it, and I really just wanted to do a very loose adaptation of it, and so I ran with it and made a crazy horror short. So yeah, that's about it.
I'm a big fan of the Sheridan Le Fanu.
Yes.
If I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes.
Novella myself, because I'm a big vampire fan.
Yeah.
Not a fang banger, but almost. Uh, and I feel like the Carmilla gets a little bit of adaptations, but I'm always really excited to see people kind of like riff on that sort of tale. And I think that there's not enough really kind of like especially female gaze sort of
Yeah.
representations of vampires. So brava to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Kyle, if you want to go next. Kyle, are you there? Oh,
Uh, sure. Yeah, sorry, my internet's being weird.
Okay.
I'm Kyle Mangione Smith, Los Angeles-based filmmaker, the director of Underneath, which is psychological
uh-oh.
monster.
Kyle, I think we're losing you.
Did I just cut out there?
Yeah, you just gotta. You're back though. I think.
Well, I directed Underneath, and it's a psychological horror film about failing relationships, and having a monster in your basement, which everyone loves. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Richard, if you want to go next.
Hi, I'm Richard Lippersong. I am the director of The Cruise. I am in Los Angeles, but I'm originally from Minnesota. This film was just something I came up with like a long time ago, and it was just a small project that I did before I moved to LA. So yeah, wanted to do something different.
Nice. Brody, and I guess Josh too.
Hi everyone, I'm Brody Scalise. I'm the writer-director of Itsy Bitsy Spider, based out of Vancouver, Canada. And Itsy Bitsy Spider is a sort of a throwback to psychological horror of the 70s, with a story of based on personal experiences and various fears of mine. And somewhere Josh is around me on a screen here.
Hey, I'm Josh. I'm the producer of Itsy Bitsy Spider. Yeah.
It's super nice to have you both. And thank you. So, and joining us now also is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if you want to introduce yourself, a little bit about your film.
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to add the title of my movie to my name on Zoom, but I'll figure that out later. Yes, I'm Elizabeth. I'm based out currently from Austin, Texas, but when I shot New Flesh for the Old Ceremony, I was based out of New York, and we shot it in New England, in Pennsylvania, when I was a student in Tisch, New York University. And it's sort of a lesbian, reverie of a movie, very much rooted in the tradition of, magical realism, very much inspired by, the efforts of Pedro Almodovar, the Spanish director, and the way he approaches ideas of, of the ways he, puts hyperbole in his movies, and the way he deals with themes of passion and just homosexual desire. And I kind of wanted just to have the backdrop of this intense lesbian passion and physical and extremely sensuous love, and how that really propels the movie forward and brings the really kind of grisly themes of physicality and feasting into the film.
That I did not even pick up the Almodovar sort of connection, and I'm so glad that you said that, because now all I'm thinking about is that now. So I have to say that the New Flesh for an Old Ceremony was the sort of like the starting point for the horror program. I saw your film. It was one of the first submissions I watched when I started going through our submissions, and I was like, wow. It's really amazing. It was really, I like, it's such a like sort of a visceral kind of like film that like you, from the get-go, from the moment that when you first get into the film, it's just like it's boom, and it just doesn't stop, which is kind of really kind of amazing. And this kind of like, I guess we'll kind of like pick up for my first question. I'm always fascinated by I'm, as a filmmaker myself, fascinated by who is sort of your role models as far as your cinematic style, who you look to. We all have influences, and we're all influenced by people. Maybe Elizabeth, if you can kind of maybe go on a little bit further about Almodovar, and sort of that sort of inspiration, that starting point for you. We can kind of take it around.
Yes, absolutely. When I was starting the film, for me, as a queer person, I had, the idea of that story that I created with my boyfriend at the time, now husband. And in the beginning, it was just, two people, two like nameless protagonists. And I was kind of going back and forth about who I wanted them to be. And I felt like because it was a horror movie and it was experimental and supernatural, I had a feeling that if I make them gay, it will make the movie niche, and it will be very hard for the people to relate to it. It immediately, take it from the idea of like, sort of this like universal ideas of love into a very niche sort of love. And I kind of was thinking about the directors who centered their filmography not just on like, I would say, queer narratives, but who'd had queer protagonists who worked with queer casts. And I think Pedro Almodovar is a great example. And although he has movies, dealing, talking about, HIV crisis, or talking about, trans experiences, but he has, he has so many movies, like about motherhood, or about, I don't know, about addiction. And he has, gay romance in it, or he has, he talks about breakup, and he has gay characters in it. And it's sort of circumstantial, the fact that they're homosexual. And I kind of like that, the fact that we're kind of putting the focus away from the homosexuality, in the way that for the way heterosexual audience perceives queer narratives, it feels to me like for straight people, when they watch a gay movie, for them it's sort of like they always have an expectation, it's going to be, there are they always expect a sort of a narrative about I don't know, that a gay movie is like about I don't know, about like an HIV crisis, or about, I don't know, dancing, or about drag. But really, a gay movie can be any horror story, it can be any story at all. And for me, Almodovar, not just aesthetically but also ideologically, was such a great starting point. for that.
Thank you for that. Richard, if you might want to kind of talk about your influences in making The Cruise and also influences as a filmmaker.
For The Cruise, I wanted to tell like a typical slasher movie, but kind of creating a ghost story with it. And then originally it wasn't supposed to be focusing on a gay couple, but then, you don't often see gay couples in a horror movie, so I wanted to just contribute that. And the idea of the whole cruising thing was actually something that I was told that actually happened, or actually, I don't know, actually happened, but it was like a ghost story that was told to me, and I wanted to make that into a movie. And a lot of inspiration came from Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story, 80s slasher films, and also like the neon lighting that's in the movie was inspired by like films by Dario Argento. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had this sort of like the kind of like an 80s sort of kind of thing, even though it was set in 1969, which was kind of interesting. And what I really kind of appreciated is like, yes, it was sort of this ghost story. I thought there were zombies at the end, but ghosts actually make more sense. But this sort of like harkening back to sort of like gay male history with cruising in parks, which I don't think really happens a lot, especially not now during the pandemic. But it seems like once all the sort of like dating apps have sort of happened, that sort of art of cruising or those spaces to cruise for sex don't really exist really anymore. And I think that was kind of important to sort of like kind of make that sort of touch point. So I appreciate that you did that. And it's strange that it wasn't gay to begin with. That's
Yeah,
because it felt kind of organic. And that was sort of the really kind of interesting thing. And I have to say that about everyone's film here is like the sort of gay representation in it felt very sort of authentic and real. And it wasn't like they're gay, rainbows and glitter, which is good. I feel like it's we've moved to a place in the culture that we should be seeing stories that are kind of told like this, that everything doesn't have to be like, and there's a place for like something like Call Me by Your Name or like one of those like a coming out kind of trope, but there's a lot of people that don't necessarily need that, and the culture needs to sort of like also sort of benefit that as well. So kind of appreciate it. Connor, if you want to talk about your inspirations.
Yeah, so yeah, basically playing off that with like dating apps and stuff, I really wanted to like mess with like the risk that goes with meeting up with someone that you don't really know. Basically based off experience, that was really my influence. I don't think it was really any specific like film or director like specifically that really like pushed me to do this. It was really kind of like an idea that I had. But yeah, I mean but yeah.
Totally fine.
But personally, I mean, influences of my own, I've always kind of geared more towards horror directors, kind of like Ari Aster, and like Fede Alvarez. Those are some like recent ones, but yeah.
That's great. Piper.
I guess, I mean, it started with Carmilla, the novella. I was taking a vampire course with Peggy Alwest, who's a wonderful filmmaker at Bard College. Yeah, she's amazing, and she's an amazing teacher. And I was watching a lot of vampire films, and some in the genre were kind of campy and others were more serious. And I was just like, wow, you can really do so much with this genre and with this, trope of the vampire. And I was also taking a queer cinema class, so I felt like they just kind of collided into this one thing. I don't know, I didn't really have any particular filmmakers as inspiration. I just knew the people I wanted to make it with, these guys, and Taylo, who also did the music on my senior thesis. And I just, started with all these wonderful people, and it was a very, very small crew. And I was working with actors that I was close with, and we were all, I don't know, just trying to make this little movie that was very dark and sexy and crazy. And I don't know, I'm now losing words. It was just a crazy film, and I felt like I got to sort of explore what, you know, the female gaze is. And it wasn't really sensual, it wasn't really careful, it was kind of hard and, I don't know, gritty. And that's something I'm into and interested in exploring. It doesn't have to always be soft lesbian movies, they can be insane, wild and wonderful. And it was just so fun to make. And I'm happy that people get to see it and see this. It's very, it's not as close to the novella as, one might think. It's definitely a loose adaptation, but it is a very, very, very loose adaptation, but that's where it started. And Peggy guiding me through it. And I don't know, I'm just happy that I got to make it in the first place.
I'm really glad you make it too, because I want more lesbian vampire. Actually, I want more vampires in general, but
yes.
it just keep them coming. I'm like, feed vampires, feed. Kyle, what about yourself?
I'm gonna apologize in advance if I cut out because my internet's being weird. With that, The Shining and like David Lynch have both been like influences, just in terms of like how to think about and the way like sound plays with it. And then just beyond that, I guess like one thing that's always really resonated with me about horror in particular is that it has such a long history of genuinely DIY low budget productions where it's just some dudes with a camera working within their means and like what they have. And at the time I was a student filmmaker that didn't really have money to make a short film, and so a lot of where the story came from was literally just me like looking at my apartment and thinking, okay, how can I like use what I know about this space to like come up with a compelling story. So that's kind of like the main way that I approached it.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about Brody and Josh?
I guess inspirations for this piece in particular is definitely old sort of style of horror like Repulsion, Polanski's Repulsion for sure on this, and also Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, so very more psychological space, and stylistically definitely more Polanski style with Rosemary's Baby, and it's a shame he's a bit of a blasphemous name now, but yeah, Repulsion and Rosemary's Baby and Black Swan were for sure three films that I definitely had at the forefront of my mind, and I really responded to even some of the newer filmmakers like Connor was saying, Ari Aster, who injects kind of his personal stories into the stories he's sharing. So I was very inspired by that.
Josh, anything to add?
And just like inspiration for us was making sure that we used we avoided like VFX as much as we could, and like when like we have tarantulas and spiders happening in the project, so we made sure that we're using real stuff just to get like the grittiness and like the realness of the time that we were going after, rather than. And also, I don't know if we've mentioned this, but we were part of a filmmaking competition making this, so we filmed it in 3 days and posted the whole thing in 5.
Wow.
And then that's it.
And then we had to hand it over, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was done.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 days.
But it was.
And yeah, we locked it in 2 days. Sound, composed, all original composition, and then colored, and that's that.
It was quite intense, yeah, and especially working with spiders. It's essentially like working with animals. You can't even really control spiders as well. You sort of blow wind at them. Like we had an insect wrangler on set who brought what 6 to 8 different tarantulas of different sizes and colors and stuff. And I'm an arachnophobe too, and so I thought this was like a good way for me to get over my fear by like condition therapy, but it didn't really work out that way.
Well, I think maybe because you had such the compressed time, and you have your fear. It was a scary as fuck kind of film. I'm sorry, like I don't really like spider. I mean, I don't mind spiders, but I'm like, if they're big and hairy like that, I'm like, oh, ah.
Yeah.
You definitely got all the sort of the chills in there, which was kind of great. So
Good. I'm glad.
But it was funny that my programming team voted your main character's sweater as the ugliest sweater in the submission file. So
that's funny. I have that sweater too. I kept that sweater as well. It's got a big nice blood stain on it and stuff. But yeah, even that sort of lent to this idea of the timelessness aspect of it too, because there isn't really anything in the film that kind of specifies like a solid time. And even the apartment they live in is sort of this weird, like 70s kitschy, dank, dark, dirty place. So yeah.
Looks like I was like, this looks like my apartment.
Yeah, there you go. You shot at your place, Sean.
Yeah. It's actually a hotel, just in case.
That's amazing.
The CB Hotel.
Like 2 stars.
Yeah. That's generous.
So Elizabeth, I have to say that one of the things I really loved about your film, one, that it was set in New England and it kind of fit very perfectly with our sort of weird, chilly sense of gothicness that kind of pervades the sort of culture in New England. Why the consumption like that? It was really kind of an interesting thing, and I loved the sort of the metaphorically that of the passion between the two of them. But the premise, I was just like, it was so interesting because I've never ever seen anything. How did you kind of come up with that sort of like that sort of scene of sort of the consumption?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is a lot to say just in the canon, just in the, in the literature canon, cinematographic canon about the parallels between, the sex and eating, or, kissing, things like that. And to have, and, kind of having this over, consuming love, one of them, and, especially because the lover who gets eaten, she's the more of a kind of an extroverted one, the one who is kind of overbearing one, and the personality of the dogs. And initially we wanted to have 10 dogs to kind of initially we had a dog wrangler and 10 dogs, 10 corgis, and we wanted to have them in the shots at all times, to kind of nail the idea of, to have a lot of close-ups of them eating, and to kind of have this like overbearing physicality of love that turns into, disgust, like the love, basically the passion that becomes disturbing. And, starting with a shot where they are, having sex, and I think it's a very really, revealing shot, but at the same time, I think it's, at least, I tried to do it as tastefully as possible. But at the end, there is, certain sort of like an inversion or even like a perversion of that idea, of that shot, where the, the remaining lover, the main character, she's eating what's remained of the dogs whom she killed.
Yep.
So I think that, we kind of tried to keep, the movie more or less as kind of like the poem. To kind of have the metaphor of eating, of sexuality, because of sex, of how much how physical it is. And yeah.
I mean, what really kind of like just struck with me is that sort of her sort of relishing this, and she ate her lover, correct? Yes.
So she, at the end, she, it's kind of left behind. It's left for the viewer to decide, more or less. But she eats at the end. She eats the dogs. The viewer can decide if they want her to eat the dogs or to eat what's remained of the lover, etc. And we had such we went through a lot with the dogs themselves, because the arrangements with the dogs unfortunately fell through kind of the day before we needed them. So we sourced those like 6 dogs that you see in the movie, like the night before, and they were taken from different, like from friends and family, and put into that house because we were living in the house that we were shooting in. And that was all pretty intense of an atmosphere, and we're living there for like 5 days, and we left, the day we left, there was like a big lightning and big storm, and we were living in the truck, never to return again to that small town in New England.
That's so kind of amazing, and what a kind of great sort of like finishing point for that sort of process of being in that sort of enclosed sort of capsule when you're making this. But you kind of felt that sort of like, this is the sort of little lesbian sort of utopia in the woods with these dogs and their love. And I definitely took it as she was eating her lover, and she was just sort of relishing it.
Yes,
absolutely. I love that it sort of has that sort of you can read it both ways. And now I'm going to want to watch it again and think about it in the sort of the aspect of her consuming the dogs, because that was also a really kind of interesting sort of point as well, because it seemed like the dog sort of like took the lover's sort of persona as well after they ate her. So
yeah, and because you mentioned the Gothic aesthetic and the New England aesthetic, and obviously I'm not American, and I kind of I would say that I have more than art house aesthetic about my craft. But New England was always the place out of all the places in the US where I would be shooting my film. And one of the big inspirations was the Witch, that was released like several years ago. And that was, I think the subtitle of it was also the New England folk tale. So I think that the kind of the New England canon was also injected into the film, and kind of was felt by the location and by the cast.
Kyle, what about your sort of film and the sort of the what is in the basement? That was the question that I sort of really had. They have this sort of thing that's underneath, but you never really see what it is, and why the burden of the couple sort of trying to have to deal with this.
Well, I guess like a lot of the point of it is that the film starts with them having this like kind of tense discussion, and the whole time it's meant to be ambiguous about what exactly they're talking about, and you like hear this thing, but I think like the lack is in a way like I think what I was going for, and what makes it work, because you then have to project what information you are given onto like what you think that thing is. So it's a bit hard for me to answer that question, because like at no point during making it was I like thinking very literally about like what this thing is. It's more the way it like functions, way it informs like this relationship that they have with each other.
It kind of gave me like some like a little bit of like Blair Witch vibes, where you never know what's there, that sort of like invisible sort of like evil or whatever that is drawing you. It was good. It was really well done. I really enjoyed
Thank you.
So you're welcome.
Yeah, that I mean the Blair Witch is like a very big point of inspiration for me, and I mean again also one of those instances where I think the nature of how low budget and DIY it is, and the fact that they had to work within those constraints is actually what makes it work. And so with this project in particular, like I said earlier, that was something I was really focusing in on, was like I know what I immediately have access to and what I can do, and I kind of built it from that point, you know?
That's great. So Connor, to kind of ask you, one of the things that kind of stuck out about your film to me was the sort of after they got to the Pickup's house, there was a lot of this negotiation about like condoms, not condoms, clean versus that. I thought it was a really interesting sort of like conversation, which one necessarily you don't really hear about in horror movies at all, but also
Right.
it's a little bit absent from the sort of queer cinema canon as well. So tell me a little bit about what sort of your motivation to kind of put that conversation sort of into your film.
Well, I thought it was a good point to kind of include. I mean, given they didn't really know each other, and there's that risk. I really did want to have like that question of like kind of like getting in your head like a psychological like those cutaways. Basically, like what if this happens? So kind of like he gave him like the wrong idea by thinking that he doesn't need to wear a condom. They're gonna be okay. And then he's getting all tied up in his head like, okay, like something's obviously wrong here. I mean, I thought it was a very good point to include because it is an issue, I think it should be talked about, horror film or not, but yeah, I mean, I just thought it was a really good point to include.
Thank you for that. So Richard, my I want to say that the Mr. Sailor was probably the worst boyfriend ever. I would have been so mad if I was the pirate in that film and my boyfriend brought me out to the cruising with a ghost story. I'm like, why? So how did that sort of like because it's slightly a horror trope, but how did that sort of like that thought process of how your characters related to each other?
Well, you're supposed to believe that their relationship has been pretty long at this point where like, they kind of pick at each other. So like him going out, oh, I'm gonna take you out to the woods and like pull this prank on you. Like that was kind of that's like something that like a long-term relationship couple would do. But yeah, I don't know what to add to that question.
I just kind of wanted to make that comment because I was just like, oh, what a bastard.
I know, kind of mean.
I mean, it was prime sexy time too. You're at the cruising spot in the woods. He could have gotten some had he played it right.
Right.
Which would have been a totally different movie.
Yeah. Could have went that route.
Right. So Piper, for you, my question for you is, obviously you're based this on like loosely on Carmilla. My programming team commented about the dancing in it, like the awkwardest dancing in the festival, which is kind of amazing. But it was kind of like point to process from point A to point B of how Carmilla kind of seduced Laura a little bit, which was kind of nice. And I guess my question for you is like, as far as like vampire and the vampire lore, what is your personal favorite vampire film and why?
My favorite vampire film, I think like right now I think it's Let the Right One In. I love that movie. I think it's so crazy and so creepy. And these actors they're children and they're amazing, and it's just and I love the colors, and that was definitely a discussion when we were doing color, sort of basing it around that kind of, not completely depleting everyone of color, but just sort of a little gray wash and washed out. But I think it's going back on that dancing scene. I think it's really funny that you brought it up because we shot that with no music, and we were all in this house together. We had 3 days to shoot. We were shooting from, I think, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So we're like living on a completely different wavelength of the world. And when it came down to the scene, everyone was so tired. And I was just like, okay, we're going to shoot it with like no music. And I didn't even tell them to like think of a song or think of the same song. And it was just like, I mean, I was cracking up when we were shooting this because no one knew what they were doing. And I wasn't, you know, really being the best director. I was just sort of like, yes, this is great. All right, move on, next scene. But no, it was pretty goofy. And I think it's funny that people picked up on that. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, what are they doing? But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Well, no, it was good because it kind of spoke to sort of like Laura's sort of state of mind in it too,
Yes.
which was kind of nice. Because it was, I'm sure for her, a very awkward to be the sort of the glamored kind of an awkward position to be in. So, but I want to kind of bring it in because I want to bring Tello in. Speaking of music, you're the composer. What was your sort of inspiration for the music of Carmilla?
Well, the interesting thing for me is that I'm not big into horror in general, and I don't actually have like that much to draw from musically with that, which I think turned out to be a good thing in this case. I think I wanted to just give the film a general like consistency in sound and to give it like themes, and kind of going back to what some other people said, I you know, didn't really have access to instruments or that much. So from the get-go, we were like, all right, this is going to be a synthesizer score. Obviously, Wendy Carlos came to mind and some other folks that we talked about a bit. But there was a bunch of stuff that didn't make it in the film, and I just developed a number of melodies and themes from seeing cuts of it, and did a lot really from that opening scene. So I think there was a lot of music in the film. Honestly, there's a lot of it, and I think it was just a question of how do we like kind of create something that's a little bit more than just background music, you know, that kind of pushes the film forward and gives it both like a mood and a eeriness, but also gives it like something that will help you remember it even more. Like I remember that you know, the opening or the bathtub scene or whatever it might be. Yeah,
I mean the bathtub scene is really kind of great because it is this sort of really kind of delicious sort of fever dream where you expect the seduction from the vampire to sort of come in, is that when you're like the most relaxed and, you know, kind of let it in. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Vampire Lovers, the Hammer film, I think. The Vampire Lovers. Vampire Lovers. That sort of like, it was you almost wanted that whisper, like too, like Laura, you know.
Well, we did have that, and then I cut it out of the film. We went there, and then I was like, let's just, it's just gonna be music. It's just gonna be music, and it's gonna be in the tub, and then the shoe is gonna happen, and then she wakes up.
But even though you took it out, it still was sort of there because you kind of, I definitely, as I was watching it, kind of experienced that sort of like Laura,
right.
You know.
Felt the vibe was there, but yeah, no, we definitely. It just sounded a little silly, but I'm glad that Laura vibe was in there.
Because I mean the thing is like too, horror as a genre has a little bit of like camp to it usually, and I feel like that again, as queer sort of filmmakers and making queer stories, that sort of sense of camp often kind of infiltrates itself in a lot. So you know, thank you again for sort of taking it out and sort of having it there.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that this film has that campy element because, you know, we were all in this like, David. Because it's sort of we were all taking this so seriously. and maybe too seriously. And of course, when you take things too seriously, and it's a vampire movie, it's gonna be campy as hell. And I definitely saw that more when I was editing it. I'm like, oh, okay, I see this now, and just let it be. You know, campy's great. Camp is great. Love camp.
Well, I think that's sort of something as filmmakers. It was funny during the last Q&A I did. Someone mentioned that this French term called bricolage, where you sort of like do with what you have. And I feel like a lot of the ways as filmmakers, you sort of you shoot, you do your sound and stuff like that. But it's really that sort of what that footage is once it's sort of there, and you kind of look at it and kind of unpack what you've sort of made is always really an interesting thing, and then how you construct it to sort of create that narrative. And this is kind of like sort of my last question for everybody, and this is sort of like a basic question that we want to ask all of the filmmakers in the sort of Q&As for the festival, is because we've kind of coming off of a year and some change of the pandemic, what challenges and what sort of struggles yourself has the pandemic has it sort of like have you prospered, have you like sort of suffered like personally, and then sort of what is next for you as far as your work? It's kind of like a twofold question, like how have you been handling the pandemic, and then what's next, I guess. And I guess we'll start with Connor.
Ooh, that's a big question.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
So the pandemic, it was pretty different. Although I feel like without the pandemic, this probably wouldn't have ever happened. Because when everything started, I had to leave school. There was a time where, you know, I had a lot of free time where I was actually able to execute a script and contact people. And by the time when we were all ready to like shoot, we had to, you know, take that extra step, especially making a film where two people are, you know, intimate with each other. It's kind of hard to, you know, be safe in that kind of environment. But, you know, we went the extra step to be safe when it comes to crew and doing COVID tests and making sure everyone is healthy when executing this kind of project. But when it comes to what's next, it's really hard to tell. I'm kind of more of a photo and video artist. So after this film, I'm going to be working on a lot more photo-based works. Also because, you know, there's a lot more changes, things are opening up. We're adapting to the COVID environment, that's for sure. But I plan on going back to school. So it's hard to tell. I'm not sure, but I'm sure there's going to be something. So
nice. The future is broad and wide. Also too, you should drop your Instagram so we can all kind of connect with each other, so we can follow your work. Put it in the chat, please. Richard, what about yourself? How's the pandemic been treating you, and what's next?
The pandemic has been really a roller coaster for me, emotionally and mentally. But during the pandemic, I did create like a fake movie trailer that I made with my roommate, and it's something that I want to create like in a bigger thing. But it's called Unboxed, and it's on YouTube. I can drop it in the chat. It was just like a parody, like found footage horror parody on a lot of things. As far as next project, I actually work as a film editor, so I have something in the line that I can't really talk about, but it's horror related. So yeah, I'll just drop my IG on the chat, and yeah.
Hey, thank you. And thank you for doing it. And again, excited to see what's next. So Carmilla team, how's the pandemic been treating you? What's next?
I think the pandemic was perfect for this movie because we shot it pre-pandemic, and I was sitting on this footage for so long, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, I have nothing to do. I'm gonna edit this movie, and I brought David in, and I was talking to Taylo, and we just, you know, it was perfect for post-production. It couldn't have come at a better time because he just had so much opportunity to just work on it. I was working on it for so long. It just became my world. I was in New York, I was in New York City, so it was really, really scary. And I had this to sort of go to and work on. In terms of what's next, I'm writing a feature right now. That's in the works. And I'm an actor, so I'm doing auditions for, well, self-tapes, fun times, everyone. And, just trying to see what comes next.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
I'm Brandon. I'm Piper's DP.
Yes.
Where I was on this project. Pandemic has been weird, which I think we can all agree on. We all work together. I wrote a script. I was gonna have Piper act in it. It was me, this gay horror movie, and the location, postponed on us. So still working on that. Some other projects. It's hard. It's hard to stay inspired when you don't leave the internet, you don't leave your room. I've been feeling, closed off from that. So I've been working on doing photography and just exploring. Yeah.
It's important to stay creative.
Yeah, it's hard, but it's
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. How you survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And great for continuing your photography. Keep those juices, keep it juicy. Keep it juicy. So yeah, definitely looking forward to what's coming next from you guys. Itsy Spider Crew, what about you? How's the pandemic been treating you, Josh and Brody? And what's next? What's next?
I'll keep my answer quick because Josh has a way better answer than I do. So so basically, yeah, pandemic has sucked. We finished and screened Itsy Bitsy Spider last February here in Vancouver, and then 2 weeks after the big hurrah party, big screening, we went into lockdown, and then COVID really hit hard. And our city's in another lockdown again, so it's like we have a few more months to wait until we can get vaccinated here. But I've written a couple shorts. I finished a vomit draft of a really bad feature that I'm rewriting, and hopefully trying to get some money from some government funding agencies that support the arts here in Canada and in Vancouver. So I've been pestering Josh with helping me with that. And okay, now Josh, you go. You have a better answer.
No, well, yeah, so we're working on that project that he's talking about, kind of a psychological thriller going on. I just finished another short film, but it's a drama. It's not very horror. And then I just kind of got bored, so I went on a reality show for a little bit that I got kicked off of recently. Yeah, I was a contestant on the Canadian version of Big Brother. Fun. But they kicked me out. So now we're back here working on projects. I actually did that experience though to kind of get my mind into a more genre sci-fi world where I'm developing some ideas based around that and just like kind of this new post-apocalyptic world that we're venturing into.
Creative for everybody. Kyle, what about yourself? Kyle, are you there? All right, I think Kyle has lost us and frozen. So Elizabeth, last but not least.
I mean, it's very hard to follow up what he said about the Big Brother. That's like, wow, that's really cool. But pandemic has been really hard. I mean, it's been a lot of experiences. Me and my husband, we moved to Austin, Texas, right before the pandemic. I have been, I've done the post-production for New Flash, for the old ceremony, finally finished it, after kind of like a long time in limbo. I've actually co-directed a longer short drama film called Polly in Atlanta, which has been it has been, for a year in post-production so far. And we've been really lucky that we wrapped the actual principal photography basically 3 weeks before the quarantine started.
Oh.
And yeah, that's been incredibly fortunate. And we've been in post-production ever since. And I'm actually planning to do 2 micro shorts, kind of like 3 minutes each, in New York in the next several months, if everything goes well. And I don't want to I want to knock on the wood while I talk about them, but I'm, one of them also is queer related, not a horror movie, but a drama kind of exploring, ideas about same-sex sex work, also about two women, and one of them being, working as escort in New York City, and another one being a female client. So hopefully all that goes well, and because it's a 3-minute film, hopefully it won't be in, for several years in post-production limbo. I can send it out to festivals a bit sooner.
Send it my way. Please.
Oh, definitely will.
Yeah, and all of you, if your next films, if they're queer in content, whether they're drama, horror, or whatever, or sci-fi, please send them this way. Kyle, how's the pandemic been treating you, and what's next for you?
It's been complicated and difficult because it happened like literally right as I was graduating from school. So that kind of wrecked the entire way I thought that whole thing was going to go. And then I kind of had to figure out moving across the country because I was located in Boston. I moved to Los Angeles for career purposes. But so I just got settled in here in January, and I've just been looking for work since. So I don't really have like any explicit projects in the pipeline. I definitely have some like ideas that I've been talking with friends about, that similarly to how I made this one, just making something in my apartment with my friends.
Collage.
Exactly. Because that's something where I feel like at this point I'm fairly confident in like operating within that space. But beyond that, I'm really just trying to like,
oh no.
industry
Okay.
start making.
Kyle, we're
Hello?
looking at you again. Are you back? You're back. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. This whole time it's been a nightmare.
Sorry.
But-
Well, I'm sorry that this time has been a nightmare for you, but I'm glad that you joined us. So again,
Yeah.
Any last words? Because I'm going to bring it home.
I think that'll do it for me, honestly.
Okay. Well, looking forward to seeing what's next for you in your new chapter, Kyle, moving across the country, and it should be hopefully some good things coming out of it. So, but I want to thank all of our filmmakers for coming. Thank you guys so much for this and submitting your films and being part of the festival. We do it for you guys because we love sharing your stories, and so continue, please make those works, tell those stories, because we want to share them with an audience. And if you haven't seen the Horror Shorts program, what are you waiting for? It started April 1st and it's running through April 30th on Zerb TV. Our main Wicked Queer 37th edition starts April 8th and runs to the 18th with all of our features. www.wickedqueer.org to get tickets and information. And again, thank you filmmakers for being part of this. I really blessed to sort of share your work with an audience. So thank you so much.